All right, guys, welcome back to Hark the Pod. Of course, I am your sports editor and host, Shelby Swanson, joined here by Gwen and Daniel Way, assistant sports editors at the Daily Tar Heel. Guys, how we doing today?
You know, I'm doing all right.
Doing all right? Daniel, what about you?
Doing well.
Doing well.
Long drive yesterday, but we're here. So.
Daniel, where were we coming from yesterday?
We were at Pittsburgh for the UNC football game at Pittsburgh covering.
Yeah, hype stuff. I mean, DTH on the road. What else? Obviously, as you guys may have noticed, we did not have an episode last week due to technical difficulties, but it doesn't matter. We are back in action. So, just as a note, as always, we will have plenty of sports coverage from this weekend in Wednesday's print paper, so be sure to check that out in blue boxes on Wednesday. But first, as Daniel mentioned, we were live, boots on the ground in Pittsburgh this weekend for that UNC versus Pitt football game, and we have a lot to talk about. Just starting off, a little recap. On Saturday, UNC faced off against Pitt on the road in the team's ACC opener, and UNC recorded a 41-24 win. I think in terms of score predictions, Gwen was closest, so she will be getting that cookout milkshake. Shout out. North Carolina improves to 4-0 on the season. The first 4-0 start for the Tar Heels since 1997, which was the last year of Mac Brown's first stint in Chapel Hill. And in terms of talking points, I mean, guys, we got to start off talking about that performance from Elijah Huzzie. I wrote about it in my sidebar. He delivered a standout performance, really just an all-around versatile performance. Again, as I wrote, he literally has versatile tatted on his arm, and we saw why on Saturday. I think the standout moment was probably that 52-yard punt return touchdown. It was his career first and UNC's first since Daz Newsome's punt return touchdown against Syracuse in 2018. So, been a long time coming, both for the Tar Heels and for Huzzie. And we have a little audio here, just what Mac Brown had to say about Huzzie following that performance on Saturday.
What we saw at East Tennessee State was an All-American that had 12 interceptions. And he's just a ball hawk. He's got instincts, he competes, and he has tremendous hands. And a couple of those catches were just phenomenal. And I told him this week during practice, I feel a punt return coming. I know we just got to give him a little more room, give him a chance. And man, he broke some tackles, and you go north and south, and that's when punt returns happen. And so proud of him that he accomplished that tonight. But he's really a good player.
All right, as I said, I wrote about Huzzie's performance against Pitt on Saturday. And Gwen, following that game against Minnesota, you wrote about Nate McCollum's performance. Just what do you think the past 2 weeks have revealed to us in terms of these new offensive weapons that are cropping up for the Tar Heels?
Yeah, so I really think that the most notable thing is really that versatility, not just of individual players, but for the whole team. I think throughout those first 2 games, it was really unclear if UNC would be able to lean on their air raid style of offense that they favored last year, or even if really new offensive coordinator Chip Lindsey could successfully implement that strong passing scheme. But after these last 2 games, I think that you can say for sure, confidently, that Drake May has found a couple of reliable receivers in transfer Nate McCollum, who you mentioned, Shelby, after that Minnesota game, who had 165 yards, 15 receptions against them.
Not bad.
And then to some extent, guys like J.J. Jones, who is the top receiver against Pitt. Also, though, I think that you have to, acknowledge transfer Elijah Huzzie, like you were talking about, who was really able to step into the role of punt receiver, returning that punt for a touchdown all the way home at Pitt. I know Shelby talked about versatility, but I think it's really important to note the versatility of the whole team rather than just the individual players, and that's really what stood out throughout these past 2 games.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I absolutely agree. And I think when you add in just that absolute show that sophomore running back Amarian Hampton put on against App State, 3 touchdowns, I think 234 rushing yards, it's clear that UNC has established go-to weapons both on the ground, in the air, and now on the punt return, like you mentioned. But speaking of the offense, Daniel, you wrote your sidebar after the Pitt game on Drake May's performance. What did May and his teammates have to say about him and that epic left-handed touchdown pass we all saw?
Yeah, so Drake, he's a humble guy. He's always gonna like downplay things. And when Mac was like, it was the best play I've ever seen in my college football career. I've seen a lot of stuff. Drake was like, "Oh, I don't know about that," and
He
then
said, "Nah."
right,
And I quote.
Yeah, so basically, it was actually interesting. Drake May was told by Mac, was like, that play is going to be on like number 1 on SportsCenter, and Drake's like, I'm not even going to check. Like, the last time he did check was when Luke May hit that Kentucky game-winning shot, and it was number 1 on SportsCenter, top 10. So, but Drake was like, oh, it wasn't. He pretty much tried to play it off, and the way he described it was supposed to be an option, and he shouldn't have like kept it. He should have just like handed it off, but he misread the play, and he had 2 Panthers defenders coming towards him, about to sandwich him, and he described it as like a, sometimes you have a mistake and you're like, no, yes, and he threw up a duck. He used his right arm to kind of stiff arm the defender, and he saw Kobe Paysour, former high school teammate, former roommate, wide open in the end zone, and just put up like this Patrick Mahomes type play. So
there you go.
That's kind of what happened.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those plays that I forget what game it was after, but Mac Brown is kind of described in the same sense. One of those plays where, you go, no. Oh, good job, Drake. I think he talked about that in that South Carolina game, where I think that must have been the game where he had the connection with Copenhagen when he was just on his back by the time, Copenhagen caught in the end zone. But anyways, just kind of one of those, shoot, did we really just see that plays? I know that JJ Jones, some of the teammates are talking about, we see that in practice all the time. It's not really anything that special, but yeah, I mean, I think it's something that perfectly encapsulated May's overall game on Saturday. 296 passing yards, no interceptions, 2 touchdowns on the ground. And it's also a performance that's pretty indicative of May's improved form after a somewhat sluggish start to the season, like you wrote about, Daniel. And I think it's a performance that it's made even more impressive when you take note of just the considerable amount of pressure that May has faced due to UNC's depleted offensive line. I mean, Pitt recorded, we were counting in the press box on Saturday, 5 sacks on May, and UNC's only previously allowed, I believe, 4 sacks in the team's 3 games to start the season. So obviously that's something that the team will be looking to tweak and probably tune up in the bye week, which brings me to our bye week recap. So usually with this portion of the podcast, we will preview the upcoming UNC football game, but however, given that this is a bye week, we are instead just going to take some time to reflect on the first 4 weeks of the season. So I guess just starting with you guys, we can go to Gwen. What are the biggest storylines that we've seen thus far this season?
Yeah, so for me, I think the biggest storyline so far this season has been the defense. It's really vacillated between kind of moments of greatness and then just like mediocrity. But I do think that it has been steadily improving, at least since the game against App State. Like if you take this game, for example, I think throughout the first half, the defense was really kind of nowhere, allowing Pitt to score on the first 2 consecutive drives, get an early lead. But then it really stepped up in the second half, almost looked like a different team, held Pitt to only 7 points in that third quarter and then none at all in the fourth. So I think that was a sign of life for them, and it really like shows promise.
It's the bend don't break mentality.
Exactly.
They always talk about.
Exactly.
Yes.
And there was those 2 Huzzy interceptions that were big, 2 sacks from Rucker on the quarterback. And those are both, again, promising signs for the future. So I think it will really be something interesting to look for, to see if they can build upon, a pretty strong performance against Minnesota and then a strong performance in the second half against Pitt. So I think that's really been the standout for me this season.
Yeah, Daniel, in terms of storylines that you've seen crop up so far this season, what stands out to you?
What stands out to me the most is how the team has responded to not having like this go-to receiver. Really, like with like the Tez Walker eligibility issues, no one really knew who was going to step up in like Josh Downs' place, Antoine Green's place, who are now NFL receivers. In the first 2 games, you didn't really see that passing game. You saw Amari Hampton go for, as you said, over 200 yards, 3 rushing touchdowns.
British Brooks in the South Carolina game.
Exactly.
Right.
Against App State, they won a game for the first time since like 2015 without a passing touchdown. And when you have like Drake May, like a Heisman candidate and a projected like top 5 NFL draft pick this year, that kind of like came as a really big surprise. But really in the past 2 games, you've seen more of this balanced scoring attack. So now when UNC gets in the red zone, they have two options. They can rely on the arm of May or on the ground with Omari and just hand it off to him, try to get him through the middle to get some yards, or like a QB rollout with Drake, just keeping it. He's had
left-handed throw,
exactly,
just whatever,
things like that. But also in the past 2 games, it's really important to note how UNC's like receivers have stepped up with McCollum last week, JJ Jones with 117 yards against Pitt on just 6 receptions. He's been a really like, established deep ball threat, and it's really showed in the first 2 games. Drake only had like 10 passing plays combined where it's like 15 yards or more. In the past 2 games, he's had 19. So I think that's really like a testament to how we haven't really seen like the full UNC offense yet. We've seen 2 games where they were good in the run game, 2 games where they're good in the passing game. What's the offense look like when both are clicking? I think is the biggest storyline.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that's potentially scary for opponents, and that's honestly what I found the most notable, is that UNC is off to this, somewhat historic 4-0 start, the first since, like we said, 1997. But what's so impressive is that following that win against Pitt, Mac Brown said he sees a team that can be, quote, so much better. There's still room to grow, especially obviously in the O-line like we discussed, but that's something that North Carolina can now address and take the time to tune up in this bye week. And guys, taking a break from the football talk, we are joined today by senior writer and lead men's soccer writer for the Daily Tar Heel, Brendan Lunga. Brendan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. A long-time listener, excited to be on the cast.
You know what, Brendan, it's been a long time coming. We've had a few senior writers on in the past, but haven't had just the pleasure of having Brenda in studio with us. He is here today to deliver a very special report. Brendan, what happened on Sunday afternoon?
Yeah, the UNC men's soccer team defeated number 11 Duke men's soccer in a very emotional rivalry game.
Yeah, I mean, you were at that game. Just tell us some of the emotions and the excitement surrounding that huge upset for the team.
Yeah, there were several players at the end of the game jumping into the crowd, hugging their families. It was the first home victory for UNC in the matchup since 2020. And it's interesting because 7 of the 11 starters for UNC were playing in their first ever Duke-UNC matchup.
Wow. Yeah.
And you could still feel the intensity from kickoff. Graduate defender Vamund Holvik, who transferred here from Elon, said it was the biggest crowd he's ever played in a soccer game. I think that played a role in the emotions, but I think the emotions came from more than just the rivalry. Duke came within inches of the tying goal. With the last 2 minutes, Andrew Cortez had to slap away a shot from Duke, and right after, another shot rang off the crossbar. And I think that they learned from a week prior against number 10 Notre Dame, when they were in this very similar situation, up 1-0, and they gave up a tying goal with 8 minutes to go. And Sabuano said the team had talked about that experience, and had the roles been reversed, they probably would have tied to Duke and beat Notre Dame. So I think this time, the fact that they prevented that late game collapse and earned by far the biggest win of the season, that also added to the emotions of the day.
Yeah, I mean, huge moment for the team. And another storyline I just wanted to address, it's something that I know you wrote about in your sidebar after the game. There were a lot of cards shown in that game. Just what did Sabuano have to say after the game about that, and how do you think it played a role in just this really intense rivalry game?
Yeah, his response was basically, he didn't give a response. He said the ACC doesn't allow coaches to talk about the matter, so he said no comment. But yeah,
I don't want to get fined.
Yeah,
he did not say that. But
the chippiness of the game and the officiating was definitely the biggest storyline, at least for me. There were almost 40 fouls in the game, 13 yellow cards, and 2 reds. Duke's head coach.
That gives me a headache just thinking about it. Yeah.
Duke's head coach John Kerr was given a red in the first half. He was ejected from the game.
Ooh.
And in the 66th minute, graduate midfielder Quincy Ehrman for UNC was given his second yellow. He was ejected from the game, leaving the Tar Heels a man down for the last 24 minutes.
And I mean, not just any man down. He's a crucial member of that Tar Heel team, right?
Yeah, he's the leading scorer, and with the red card now, he's suspended for the game against Pitt. And Pitt is a top 3 scoring team in the ACC, that's going to leave a huge gap, and the officiating is having an impact not only on that game, but in games in the future. But midfielder Andrew Czech said they were expecting a red card, and it was a hard-fought game coming in against Duke, so they'll just need to reassess and get ready for Friday.
Yeah, and that next game, like you said, be on the lookout for our coverage of that game. It is on the road at Pitt on Friday and should be a really, really interesting matchup. And yeah, Brendan, just thank you so much for coming into the studio today.
Yep, thank you.
All right, and with that special report, it is now time for arguably everyone's favorite part of the episode, a little bit of quick hits.
Quick hits.
Quick hits.
Ooh, okay, guys, let's go. So, starting off with women's soccer news, the number 1 UNC women's soccer team earned a 3-3 draw with number 3 Florida State. Check out senior writer and lead women's soccer beat writer Noah Monroe's article to learn more. In volleyball news, the Tar Heels were swept by number 8 Pitt in UNC's first home loss of the season. Our very own Anna Page will have a weekend wrap-up for you to check out on the website. For field hockey, the number 2 Tar Heels dominated App State in a 6-1 win at home on Sunday, following a 3-0 win over number 17 Wake Forest on the road on Friday. Be sure to check out senior writer and lead field hockey beat writer Caroline Will's article to read more. And of course, you can check out all of those at dailytarheel.com/sports. And finally, we're going to conclude this episode, as always, with some shout-outs. Guys, just want to say thank you, from the bottom of my heart for listening to Hark the Pod this week. Please be sure to check out our next episode next week. And as always, this episode was brought to you by me, Shelby Swanson, Daniel Way, and Gwen Peace. Very special thanks to our guest, Brendan Lunga, for stopping by. And this week, we have audio editing, as always, by Sierra Pfeifer, video editing by Mackenzie Boris and Keerthana Mariappan, and music by Adrian Tillman.